Good evening and welcome to the second edition of the Mouthwash Talk Show. And yes, we have our host back, our guest host back for the show. And I'm your host, John Schmitz. And we were really happy with our comments last week. And I would, encourage you to comment in the comment section. If you have a question or a comment, we'll put it up for you and we'll discuss it. So I want to go ahead and get this thing started. So we'll start with Ashton. Ashton, how are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine as frog hair split three ways.
I don't know what that means.
It's pretty fine. Have you ever seen frog hair? It's like split three ways. It's fine. I'm not really that fine anyway. But Jacob, how are you tonight? How's it in Lake County?
It's cold and snowy. But
how much snow you got on the ground up there?
Well, honestly, every single time I count, we get some more because we got the lake up here, so we got all that lake effect stuff. So I'll look outside, at 3 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock, another 2 inches. I'd say we're up to at least about a foot now. So,
all right, well, hey, that's good luck for you. We got a few little dustings here, but it's tough sledding, laying bricks. But hey, we got a great show for you tonight. Our topics are going to be we're going to start out with. The ballot access here. That's going to be sort of our local state issue. There's been a party that's been picked on possibly. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about why is it okay to deny people from social media, yet it's not okay to deny baking a cake for a gay couple. So that's going to be our debate second part. And then, of course, you are going to love the conspiracy theory that we have coming today. I mean, Ashton has outdone herself, and we actually have a voicemail from a listener, and we're going to play that. So it's just good stuff tonight. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We are going to talk about Indiana House Bill 1134. And this bill basically is calling for the Libertarian Party to have to get the same amount of signatures as the two major parties to get on the ballot for, per se, governor or senators or anything like that. So we're going to start the discussion with Jacob, and he's going to give us his take on what he thinks about this, and maybe do a little explanation of the bill and then we'll hear from Ashton.
Yeah, well, specifically, this bill would require the Libertarian Party to have a certain signature count in each of Indiana's 9 congressional districts, specifically for governor and for senator. My suspicions as to why this bill was introduced and why it was so prioritized in the General Assembly session for 2021 is because of the surprising success of Donald Rainwater, the Libertarian candidate for governor in the 2020 gubernatorial race. As a lot of you probably already know, Libertarians typically poll only about 3 to 5% in a statewide race on a regular basis, but Donald Rainwater managed to increase that to about 12%. And a lot of that was because a lot of Republican voters, conservative voters particularly, were really disenfranchised with Governor Holcomb over his response to the COVID pandemic. So a lot of them decided to go to Mr. Rainwater, who they thought was more conservative and more liberty-oriented in a lot of those issues, in addition to other things like taxes and guns. So I think that campaign really kind of spooked the state GOP establishment that has always kind of felt like they don't need to earn the votes of conservative voters and can just kind of expect them to just go in there and pull the straight R button. So they saw the Libertarians as a real threat, and for 2020, it could be an even larger threat going forward if they can get their party more organized and to be a larger force to be reckoned with. So I think this bill was an attempt by the GOP to kind of squash any of those efforts the Libertarians could make going forward.
Okay, and that was a very good explanation. Ashton, what do you think about the fact that maybe one party's getting treated a little bit differently than another party?
I mean, I think that this is just the embodiment of what George Washington warned us against, the two-party system. That's where we're at. We have a very divided, set in our ways. There are two parties, and if you don't belong to them, your vote doesn't matter. That's where we're at in our country right now. And do I think that's wrong? quite honestly, yes. And I think this is somewhere where Jacob and I might actually agree on something, which is a rare occurrence.
Wait, we had a little bit of an agreement last week, so maybe it's starting to be a theme, but I don't know. I think some fireworks are coming on the next topic, but that's okay. We can agree every once in a while on things, especially when they're not picking on your party, Ashton, or your party, Jacob. You're picking on somebody else. So, but fair's fair, right?
Well, I think so. From my understanding, is that the original version of the bill was supposed to level the playing field, and all candidates had to get the same amount of signatures, regardless of their political party. But before it was put on the floor, it was amended and actually excluded third parties and independents. So it meant that they had to get 10 times as many signatures as other parties to be on the ballot. I just think it was a really transparent response to what we saw in the past election. And I agree with Jacob. I think that there is this fear of third parties taking votes. And when, Rainwater took 230,000 votes, those could have decided the difference in a very close election. And so I think this was a very transparent attempt to prevent that. And we have to look at whether or not the way that they're going about that is the correct way to go about it. And I would argue that it is not, and that there's another bill that was actually introduced by Representative Sue Harrington, House Bill 116 for ranked choice voting, that I think is a better way to combat the spoiler effect, so they call it, of third parties taking votes and causing a different outcome of the election.
Well, and let me interject also, John, that I think if we look at the American political system, one thing, when I look at like Europe and stuff, obviously it's more liberal than the United States. I don't usually find many points that I really agree with a lot of European politicians, but I do really agree with the idea of having multiple political parties, because I think it does give people more of a voice, and it also holds other parties more accountable. Like I feel, as a very conservative Republican, I think Donald Rainwater's run was a good thing, because it did hold a lot of Indiana Republicans accountable to their conservative base. Because if you're a conservative like myself, you don't want to just have a GOP monopoly and that's it. Because if they just always expect to get in, they're not going to be so responsive to their constituents. So I really think that's a good thing to have multiple parties. And I also do think, piggybacking off of what Ashton said, I think if the Democrats would have had a stronger gubernatorial candidate this time around, I think Rainwater could have been a huge threat to Governor Holcomb. Say if John Gregg ran again for the Democrat nomination, I think really he could have won just off the Republican vote being split between Governor Holcomb and Donald Rainwater.
Yeah, it can be an issue for sure. One of the things. Go ahead, Ashton.
The other aspect of this bill that is also concerning, I think we should say that this bill was pulled from the calendar on February 1st. Does that mean it's not going to be reintroduced at a later date? No. But it was pulled on February 1st. It did die at that point. So I think the other thing that was concerning about it was that they were saying that the third parties had to have all these signatures by the same time as the major parties, when the third parties aren't allowed to participate in the spring primaries. So their dates were July, and then they got moved back to January, which really just put some huge obstacles up. And I mean, I think Jacob and I are in complete agreement. I think this was completely transparent on the GOP's part. I think that Rainwater was a huge threat to the election this year and Holcomb, and I think that was just their attempt to try and salvage this situation in the future.
Yeah, well, let's talk about these signatures. So we were talking earlier about there was a representative that made an amendment to the bill, the Todd Young signature, where he did not quite get all of his signatures. He got like 400 and some reports, 492, 498, as low as 460 signatures, yet they let him on the ballot. And then in my personal situation, for the viewers that don't know, I ran for mayor as an independent, and I was required to get 6,106 signatures. I was able to get 8,600 signatures, but yet they threw out 1,100 of my signatures because they were registered to vote in my district, but their address didn't line up with registration. So therefore, mine didn't count. So that's one of the things. Let's talk about the signatures, and then let's fast forward to COVID. How would you like to go out and get signatures? How is that safe to go get signatures at, say, somebody's house if you are worried about this pandemic? So let's touch on those couple of issues about the signatures, and then what about getting them and how we're supposed to do that, and valid signatures and those type of things. Jacob, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, well, I definitely would argue that the signature requirement has shown itself to be more stringent or more lax, depending on who's running. As you had said, I certainly wouldn't have seen, for example, in the 2020 Republican primary for governor, them being more favorable to Brian Roth as they were to Senator Young, when Senator Young didn't meet the signature requirements for his primary. He missed it by a few, like a handful of signatures, for those that do not know. So yeah, certainly, I think these rules are kind of arbitrary, and it really just kind of goes against the whole idea of democracy. I mean, like Ashton had said, there was no real intention from the beginning for political parties in this country. Political parties were kind of served their purpose, and they were a means for an end to get information out to people, because you didn't have things like the mass media or the World Wide Web. So parties were kind of an easier way to disseminate information about candidates to people. In a way, parties are really kind of a dinosaur. While I'm not in favor of abolishing them altogether, I do think having more options would be good. And by putting arbitrary requirements for third parties, like these signature requirements, that only harms that movement for having more representation in different parties.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that when we look at why the two-party system is dangerous, we look at primaries. To win as a candidate in a primary election, there's a lot that you have to do to finagle to be able to be the candidate for the two-party system. You have to lean very one way and then all of a sudden try and sway some people from the other side. And instead of getting moderate candidates, we get candidates that are so far one way or the other. And I think that the way that we can help solve that is by ranked choice voting. And I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with ranked choice voting, but it's also called instant runoff voting. And it was invented around 1870 and has been adopted by democracies across the world. Australia has used it since the early 1900s. And you can rank the choice. There's a couple states that use it as well. California uses it.
Maine, I believe, too, just recently adopted it.
And New York voted to adopt it as well. In ranked choice voting elections, voters you don't have to, but you can rank the candidates on the ballot in order of preference. And if a candidate wins a majority of the first preference votes, then they win the race. If not, then the candidate with the fewest first preferences gets taken out of the race, and the second choice of voters is counted. And so what that happens is it changes a lot of things about voting. It can streamline the election process. It makes it less expensive and more efficient. You wouldn't have had to have a runoff election like we did in Georgia because it itself works as a runoff election. It's more fair. It also has shown that it changes the way candidates campaign because they don't want to isolate one base. So campaigns are less hateful. There's less smearing because they don't want to isolate the base of the other candidate because they need those votes. They need to be their second choice. So when we look at that Bill 116 that's been introduced into the House, I think that it's important that we look into that and try and support that in Indiana.
Yeah, and that's how they actually did the Secretary of State caucus we voted for the candidate as a state delegate, which I'm an Indiana state delegate for the Republicans. We did a virtual, and it was that way. And actually, Curtis Hill had won on the first. He had the most votes on the first ballot, but the second ballot, Todd Rokita came in and beat him. So it does make a different dynamic on things. But I think the bottom line here is I think competition makes us stronger, and good competition makes us stronger. And I just really think that when one party overruns the other, whether it's, say, in the Indianapolis city where the Democrats are living large, or as it is in the state where the Republicans are living large, I think there's a degree of complacency that sets in. If somebody's not pushing the other person, I think it gets to that point. So I guess I'm just going to throw this little question out. Do either of you ever have stars in your eyes for running for any kind of office or anything? Is that something you've even thought about, or?
I've been asked to run several times. I am not looking to do that anytime soon, but I have not ruled it out in the future.
I've also been asked. The thing is, I kind of prefer working behind the scenes. I have various political action groups that I've been in part of. For one group, if you're more conservative leaning, I'd recommend joining it, is Indiana Patriots Alliance. I'm on the board of that. And so I really enjoy running groups like that and that helps other people to run. Now, if there was really nobody else to run and people just really, really urged me to run, then maybe I'd consider it. But, currently I kind of like working behind the scenes. That's more entertaining, and I feel more productive for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's a messy business. That's for sure. And you'll find out things you never even did that you did. That was what was very interesting. It's like, wow, I did that. Wow, I don't remember it. So yeah, it's like, fortunately, most of your life has been documented by all sorts of videos and whatnot. There's not much floating around, back from the 70s. You had to have a 8mm camera and all that stuff. So I'm sure there's some stuff of me doing bad things back then somewhere, but we'll see if I run for a higher office. I'm sure they'll dig it up.
Well, and John, one other point I wanted to kind of throw in too, since we're talking about ballot access, is one issue that I really kind of push for is abolishing this idea of straight ticket voting. Because personally, I always think, I encourage anybody, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever, I encourage you not to vote straight ticket. Even if you agree with all the candidates on the ticket and you just want to go through and punch each one of them, that's fine. But the reason why I discourage straight ticket voting is because I think you should know every candidate that you're voting for, whether it's somebody all the way down at town council all the way up to governor of the state. Because even if somebody's from the same party, there's going to be different viewpoints. Like, honestly, somebody like Senator Romney from Utah and former President Trump had very different viewpoints and different things, despite both being Republicans. So I think people would be more informed about their candidates if there wasn't so much of an emphasis on straight ticket voting. Don't vote Republican. Vote for Mr. State Rep from District 8 or, Miss State Rep from District 9. That's who you should be voting for. Vote for candidates, not for party.
And when we do that, Jacob, I feel like oftentimes we fail to look into our school board candidates.
Yes.
And then people just click the first name on the list. They say, okay, well, I don't really know anything about this because I just decided I was going to vote straight ticket and didn't research anything. So I don't know anything about these candidates for school board. When we look at our local elections and our positions that are not affiliated with a political party, it's important that we educate ourselves on those because those make a huge difference. School boards make a huge difference in the education of our children. And we have to pay attention to who we are putting in those positions. That really local politics, it affects you on a much deeper level than I think a lot of people realize. They want to focus on the big elections, but change starts at home. And so we really need to make sure that we are working to look into who we're voting for in every aspect, in every position, because every position is important on that ticket.
So one more question about that. How much do you think the media plays in a role in that as far as swaying someone to be just one way or the other? I mean, just basically, what do you think that effect has really swayed people to be for one or the other? I mean, we see the divisiveness in the country right now. How much do you think the media has to play in that procedure?
I think the media has a huge role to play in swaying people one way or the other, and even selecting who's the candidate for each party. When we look at this, it should be, we are enabling the American citizens to have equal access to all the candidates, to have access to their positions. But unfortunately, what we see is it comes down to money. It comes down to who can pay for the most airtime. And that's who you see, that's who you vote for. And I personally just don't think that that's right or fair, because that's not always going to get us the best candidate. For example, in this last election, Joe Biden was really, everyone knew him. He was Barack Obama's vice president. And so he ended up being the candidate. Do I think that out of everybody running, he was the best choice? Absolutely not. Do I think that a lot of that was because of my own party trying to position Joe Biden into that role? Absolutely. But I do not think that all the candidates were given equal access or airtime. I think Bernie Sanders was really slighted a lot of the time in airtime and given the ability to participate. We have to start including our third parties in debates. It's not right to exclude them. There's no reason to exclude them. And the media decides to not air a lot of their positions. So I think absolutely the media, while I think the media is so important, and I am not saying that the media is an enemy of the people by any means, I do think that they need to work towards making an effort at providing that information for every candidate.
Yeah, and that is a great segue into our next section about discrimination, because if the media, they can shut you out if you don't have you. And honestly, that's how my shows got started. To do, Your Voice, Your Call was one of the first shows I did, because the media wouldn't cover candidates that didn't have a bunch of money. So we started Your Voice, Your Call, and I think Chris Moore's watching, and he actually does Your Voice, Your Call on the Patriot Soapbox, and he took that show over, and then I started Do Something Indie. And then this show, Mouthwash, because I just saw a lot of folks wanting to see a civil debate on each side of these issues instead of the one against the other type of thing. And as you can see here, you guys have agreed twice now on things. So, we're not as far apart as the media wants to portray us. So, and I do have pulled up here that Vivian says that Curtis lost on the third ballot, not the second. So we try to get the facts right. And if we don't, we're glad that you tell us that. So let's move on to the next topic. And that's going to be, why can't a baker refuse to bake a cake for a gay couple? And why are some people being thrown off of YouTube, Twitter, and other things? How does that seem fair? And what is your takes on that? We're going to start with Ashton on this one, and give us what do you think about that?
Okay, so first, having this debate, I'm going to have to admit my flaw, and I'm going to call myself out because I think that's so important, to own up to the ways that privilege can blind us a little bit. So I originally thought this was the perfect comparison when Trump first got banned from Twitter. I myself said that, don't come at me talking about how Trump shouldn't be banned from Twitter if you're saying that it's okay for someone to deny a wedding cake to a gay couple. And I got put in my place very quickly by seeing a friend of mine, their name is Quill. They posted something saying that this is the wrong argument for this case. They had shared some stuff. The wedding cake argument is about religious freedom and discrimination for LGBTQ plus, the LGBTQ plus community. And you can't infringe on someone as a person with your religion. So it's different than Twitter, a private company, saying that you can't incite violence on our platform. And when you agree to the terms of service, which you do agree to the terms of service when you sign up for Twitter, you agree not to post things like that. And Trump had gotten many warnings on his tweets, and Twitter had said they weren't deleting them because of his position and it as president of the United States. And he chose to continue the rhetoric and continue the inciting of violence. And so Twitter removed him. And to me, that was their decision. He signed the rules saying that he wouldn't do that and continued to post harmful rhetoric. And so Twitter removed him. I don't think the two are comparable because Trump was kicked off Twitter for violent speech and inciting violence. And by trying to compare it, you're dehumanizing the LGBTQ plus community and saying that they should not be able to participate in something because of who they are as people.
That is a point that I would not, that helped me figure that part out. Jacob, what do you have to say?
Well, I would argue the preface to my argument, and I'm going to have to explain it a little bit further, is I do believe in the right for business owners to serve who they want to serve. I think I'm very libertarian about that kind of belief that people should be allowed to run their own business without government interference. With that being said, I do not believe that the censorship of conservatives and other people with opposing viewpoints to the fact checkers on Facebook and Twitter is justified. Now, that might seem like a seemingly on the surface a contradiction in my argument. The way I would argue that it is not a contradiction is because I would very much consider Facebook, Twitter, and the other big tech giants to be equivalent to something along the lines of a energy company or a like something like NIPSCO or ComEd, like you got in Illinois. They're regulated monopolies, really. I mean, they are monopolies. There really is no other way you're going to get your voice out there without using one of these big tech platforms, unless you're going to one of the smaller alternative platforms. So I would say and also keep in mind that these monopolies have favorable tax treatment and regulations through Section 230. So I would say that if you removed Section 230 and we're just treating these like just any other company, then Twitter and Facebook would have the right to discriminate of who they'd want on their platform. But I'd say right now, with their position of how they have so much power in the tech industry, that they do need to be regulated to an extent in terms of allowing free speech. Because if you take somebody off of Facebook or off of Twitter, there really is no way for them to get their voice out there. And with how dependent we have become on technology as a way to get our voices out there for political campaigns, for businesses, for various ideas, it's just simply unacceptable to not allow people with opposing viewpoints to be on these big tech platforms.
Yeah, that is, that's the crux of the issue here. It's like, are we free to do this or that? And when is it discriminating against someone? And I think that's the problem. I have a question here. I think this one's directed towards Ashton. Let's look at this. So ask, how is it okay for liberals to say that it was okay to burn the White House down? BLM said this and posted it on their Twitter. So I don't, does that?
I didn't say that was okay.
Okay. Well, I'm just asking that how that is okay to do that.
I personally did not see that. And I follow them on Twitter. I didn't see that. I didn't see any post about it. And I run an organization that deals with equity. And so oftentimes we get hate messages when things like that are posted. So I didn't hear about that until now. And usually I hear about something like that. So if you have a screenshot from their page directly, because oftentimes, let's keep in mind, screenshots can be doctored from their page. I'd love to see it, but I have not seen that up until this point, so I can't speak on that. But do I think it's okay to say we should incite any type of violence? No, not at all. I don't think that it is okay. I think that social media can be used as a weapon, and often we can spread so much misinformation that becomes dangerous. And that's where we really have to look at what we are monitoring and what we are allowing people to see and digest, because sometimes people don't look into what they read online. I know I've been guilty of that a couple times, and I'll share something and right off the bat, because, it makes me upset. And so I'll share it. And then I'm like, I should really look into that and see if that was accurate. And I'll look into it, and it was not accurate at all. And so then I regret sharing it and delete it. So that's something that we have to look at. And if people aren't going to monitor themselves and the information that they're putting out, which people don't, then I do appreciate Twitter and Facebook monitoring that and saying this information is not accurate. And it is harmful to have such a large platform and output such misinformation. It
I
causes
think
a lot of things.
is it similar to, you always hear the yelling fire in a crowded theater is an example of free speech that's not delivered. Okay, I got a question here that let's look at Jacob on this one. Oh, hold on, it's moving around. We got people are getting excited about this subject. Here we go. This is a lot of folks on our survey, our poll, are talking about hypocrisy. About okay, they said this or the whataboutisms or all that stuff, and this one's here from Becky, friend of mine, from a long time friend, went to Ball State with me. Maxine Waters should get censured the same as Trump for inciting violence against conservatives. So, Jacob, if you touch on why that's okay, what Maxine Waters said, but yet what Trump said was different. So let's go down that little rabbit hole for a second.
Well, I mean, also, I would say when we're talking about inciting violence, let's give a real life example here for a second. When you are confronted by somebody that is threatening you, like just an individual on the street, and you decide to make a police report, the police will specifically ask you if bodily harm was threatened against you. And the reason why I draw that analogy is that to threaten violence or physical harm to somebody by the letter of the law, it is very specific. They will not allow a restraining order to be placed on somebody if they just said nasty things about you. There actually has to be very clear violence expressed. Based on what President Trump said in his speech and from what I saw with his tweets, because I did watch the speech on January 6th, I was not present there, but I have people that I know that were present there. I did not see any clear intention where President Trump was threatening bodily harm or encouraging others to do so to members of Congress, to Vice President Pence, to anybody. There was no clear bodily harm. From my understanding, the exact quote was, you're not going to have a country unless you fight like hell, and that's why you should march down to the Capitol. It was something along that extent, but there was no clear threats to anybody in particular. With Maxine Waters, from my understanding, if I am thinking of the same clip that your friend is thinking of, she actually did say to go and confront Trump supporters in stores and in restaurants. And while I don't necessarily say that's inciting violence either to that extent, it's a lot more direct than what President Trump did. And yet we see all this scrutiny on President Trump, but none on Maxine Waters. So I hope that kind of answers the question. If there's any other clarity I can shed on it, just continue to comment.
And I think Ashton's got something to say.
I do. We have a timeline, and I have the receipts right here. We have a timeline of Trump making statements that cause this type of violence. We saw an uptick in hate crimes since Trump was elected. It's just really, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That is inciting violence. He didn't say that at the Capitol when his supporters were looting the Capitol building. Instead, he said, "We love you very much. We love you, and I appreciate your passion." That's not okay. We see this history of him rewarding the violence of his supporters, chanting as they beat peaceful protesters at his rallies. There was one instance where at his rally, he was shouting, "Get him out, get him out, get him out of here." And a peaceful Muslim woman who was just standing at his rally, silently protesting, causing no problems at all, was actually physically assaulted. That is the type of violence that he incites with his language. And he is aware of this because he's been involved in multiple lawsuits where people have said that Trump's words, yes, Kristen, exactly, stand back and stand by, that was telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by to take action in the Capitol. And they did. We have so much evidence of things that he said, and whether it be off the cusp in an interview or on Twitter, it was all just a mess. And I mean, his rhetoric towards the squad led to death threats, and there had to be increased security for the congresswomen. It's false claim. Send them home. Send them where? They are United States citizens. It was just disgusting and appalling things said by someone who is supposed to be a representative of the United States of America and all its people.
Okay, well, to get a couple points in there, Ashton, stand back and stand by. That statement was made 3 months prior to the Capitol Hill demonstration. And once again, if you're going by the strict letter of the law, a police officer would not consider that to be threatening violence. You have to be threatening actual bodily harm. So we have to really establish the concept of what is threatening violence. Also, if you recall, President Trump put out a video on Facebook and Twitter that was immediately taken down on January 6th, where he told his supporters to peacefully disperse. And while people were going into the Capitol building, he specifically said, stay peaceful, stay peaceful. We are the party of law and order. So I think that dispels any of that right there, because first of all, there was no clear bodily harm that President Trump asked his supporters to perpetrate on anybody. And then when things started getting a little hot, President Trump stepped in and said, basically, cool it down. And not only cool it down, but saying that this is not what we represent. We are the party of law and order. And he specifically said that, and that tweet and that Facebook post was not removed, but his video where he clearly said for people to peacefully disperse was immediately censored by big tech 2 to 3 hours after it, if I recall correctly. So that doesn't sound like somebody inciting violence to me.
Absolutely not. You cannot.
Here's one for Ashton. Hold on a second. This was Spiro says don't dodge the Maxine Waters thing. So we've gone from baking a cake to Twitter to impeachment, which, hey, that's okay. We can go in the weeds because it's our show. But this is what's on people's minds right now. I know they started the impeachment today with, and I think a lot of that's going to be coming out. I think both sides are going to have their witnesses and they're making their case. And, I just think it's just to step back and look at it from a middle person's perspective is that it was, not a good way to go out as president. I would just say that no matter how you cut this thing up, it just wasn't the best exit strategy. So Spiro wants to know from Ashton, don't dodge what Maxine said. So what do you think about that? Do you think that was it's fair criticism that she incited people to get in other people's faces, or is it just not the same thing?
So I confront Trump supporters in a way where I will speak with them. Actually, when there was a Trump headquarters down the road from my house, I went there and I was like, please explain to me why you are voting for him, because I cannot understand and I would like to know. So to me, that's confronting. That's very different than saying when the looting starts, the shooting starts, I'd like to punch him in the face. If I shot someone in the middle of Times Square, my supporters would still vote for me. I mean, we see how his language has affected our country. There's been multiple studies by the FBI released between 2017 and 2019 that showed that hate crimes reached a high during the first 2 years of Trump's presidency. Hate crimes, especially against Muslims, increased by 5% in 2016 and were up 17% in 2017. And in 2018, they reached a high over the last 16 years. With a significant rise in violence against Latinos. And according to a 2019 report by the FBI, counties that hosted a rally with Trump as the headliner experienced a 226% increase in hate crimes.
Okay, well, that last statistic is very anecdotal evidence. Just like, for example, a question I'll pose to you right here is, should we have banned Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders supporters after a Bernie Sanders supporter went and shot Steve Scalise and attempted to shoot other members of Congress that were Republican congressmen?
What did Bernie say that incited that?
Well, but you can't clearly say that Trump incited the Capitol Hill riots, because I just proved your point that he clearly called for peace on multiple occasions until censored by big tech.
Yes, I'd like to get back to that, because saying go murder somebody.
He never said go murder somebody. He never said that.
I'm not. I'm saying once, if somebody said go murder somebody, and then after somebody had already done it, they were like, oh no, you shouldn't murder people. That does not in any way remove them from fault of that situation. So Trump inciting this violence, not only on that day, but over the last 5 years, he is responsible for it. And just because afterwards he says, oh, we're the party of law and order, we love you, go home, does not remove him from. Yes, thank you, Greg. Does not remove him from responsibility.
No relation. I don't think Greg's a relation. Same last spelling name, but no relation, I guess.
But Ashton, at the same time, you can't clearly say that he incited violence at the Capitol when he literally did not say that. He said we have to fight like hell, meaning that fighting like in a political campaign or fighting to call our congressman, that can be interpreted many ways. He did not literally go down there and say, hey, punch Mike Pence in the face or go and hit Maxine Waters with a baseball bat. There was none of that stuff said. He did not say to go. He said to march down to the Capitol building. People march peacefully all the time. And when things got hot, he clearly said, whoa, 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 this is not what I intended. Because there was nothing in his speech where he was inciting violence. And nobody can prove that because, like I said, he said it not after the fact. Like you said, he said it while it was occurring. Those tweets came out saying that we are the party of law and order, stay peaceful, while people were in the Capitol.
I'm just so flat. Like, honestly, I'm just really flabbergasted by this because you're acting like someone has to say something on that day for it to count. There's been years of this. You saying that he said, Proud Boys, stand back, stand by 3 months earlier does not have any correlation to what happened at the Capitol. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. You saw them organizing on Parler. You saw them saying, you heard our president, stand back, stand by. And they planned this. Trump has coddled and given the go-ahead to white supremacists from day one.
After condemning David Duke and other white supremacists.
Well, and I guess I'm gonna referee here on this. I guess it's one of those. It's like an intangible, unspoken situation that people read into. It basically gave some white supremacists a green light. I mean, there was that shooting in Charlotte of the 9 people at Bible study by basically a skinhead, I believe, and he just went in and sat down with them and then shot them. And I don't know if you could even say, oh, well, that's Trump's fault because he was the president and he didn't come out and arrest all of these white supremacists and this to prove that he wasn't, racist. And so I think there's enough blame to go around on both sides of this. People were willing to label him as a racist, and others were willing to take advantage of the situation, like nobody's like the cat's away, the mice will play type of thing. So I don't know if there's definitely room to argue both sides of this, and there's definitely it's ambiguous enough that you can insert your opinion here and there and make a point valid on both sides. So that.
John, we also have to think about how Trump was spreading so much misinformation about the election. And that caused a lot of anger in people that were not looking into it. They were reading the conspiracy theories online, reading Trump's tweets and not looking into it for themselves. And it caused so much anger and hatred and divide in our country, furthered it because it was already there. But it furthered that divide because people didn't trust our democratic system. Our democratic system is so important, and upholding it is so important. The peaceful transfer of power is so symbolic to American democracy. And for Trump to try and undermine that was a disgusting last attempt by a man with a huge ego that is very easy to break.
Well, considering that Trump went through all the constitutional processes to quote unquote overturn the election, I don't think that was really shaking faith in our democratic process. Rather, he was simply using the mechanisms that the founding fathers put in, such as challenging electoral certification in state legislatures, and by encouraging congressmen to dispute the election when it came to certification on January 6th. So Trump went through all the legal processes, and might I also remind you that Democrats have done the same things, where they had objected to elections. I mean, we can all go back to 2004, or 2000 rather, when everybody was saying that Bush was an illegitimate president and that Al Gore was really president. So were the Democrats spreading misinformation about the election? I don't know. And the thing is I will say with Trump's arguments, there was clearly some fraud here that was established. Now, whether it was widespread or not enough to switch the election, I've seen evidence to make me believe that it was. But I certainly think that there's indisputable evidence that there was fraud. And so there has to be questioning of our democratic system, because there are people that try to abuse it. And this has happened throughout history, way before 2020. So we have to be constantly watching our democracy and making sure that the right to vote and the integrity of the voting systems are maintained.
Well, I got a question for you, or I guess a comment of to be the devil's advocate here. So when Trump won, the folks that were really distraught and hurt and painful, and honestly, the Trump supporters show no quarter over, no mercy to those people that were sitting in the street yelling, "Oh no!" and these type of things. How is that different than the pain that the Trump supporters were feeling when Trump lost? Is it? I mean, it looks like the symptoms were different, but the problem was still the same. They were still hurting. So, what do you think about that?
Who are you asking that to?
Either one. I figured somebody jump on that one real quick, but you're like, oh, I don't know about that.
So I actually missed the beginning of your question. So the beginning of your question was the last election, the Democrat.
When Trump won, sort of, almost like, everybody could not believe, were in shock that Hillary had lost, and there was a lot of people that were suffering, and the Trump folks, they didn't show any mercy on them. And I just think that we're into a retaliation payback vicious cycle here.
I absolutely disagree with you.
Okay, I like that.
I think that Kristen said it best. It's privilege. The outcome of Trump being elected was that people were losing their rights. They were hate crimes. I mean, just the statistics I just gave you. That is what people were worried about, was that his rhetoric would embolden racism, would embolden all these people to start attacking people more than they already were. It put it much more out in the open, made them much more comfortable. And that is why people were upset. When Trump won, I was so upset. And I just cried, because as a woman, I was worried about what rights were going to be taken from me. What would I be doing? I can't imagine how people of color, the LGBTQ plus community were feeling, because I am a white woman in Carmel. I am very, very privileged. And I was distraught. And there is a difference between worrying that your Twitter might be taken away, or your guns might be taken away, than worrying about walking out on the street and somebody attacking you because you are Muslim, or your family members not being able to visit because there's a Muslim ban that he instituted. There were very real concerns back when Trump was elected, and we saw all of them. And all my friends that I spoke with on January 6th were not surprised. This is exactly what we expected to happen. And that is exactly what we were fearful of. We all knew that was coming. We all knew that was going to happen. And that was the fear. And that was being upset. And that was why everybody was so upset back then. And I just think that the privilege, the fear of losing your privilege, is what upsets a lot of people about the loss in this current election.
Okay, so I'm going to set this up for Jacob. So what you're saying is the pain from the Hillary supporters is much more than the pain from the Trump supporters. I'm talking about the actual, no matter what the reasoning is, but what the feeling is. And I know that we both have psychology degrees, so it's pain's pain, and it's all pain is in the eye of the beholder type of thing. So Jacob, what I can see your wheels turning there.
Well, I mean, I would certainly say, as a Trump supporter myself, I mean, I would say that the pains of Trump supporters were a little bit more in terms of economics. I mean, we see like just in the first 20 days of Biden's administration that we've already seen thousands of people losing their jobs that were in the fracking and oil industry. So I think a lot of people were just very genuinely scared that that Joe Biden was going to be very harmful to the economy, and that's why a lot of people showed up to D.C. to demonstrate, and were really hoping that there was a way that constitutionally that the election fraud could be addressed. I certainly would say, though, with this violence that everybody is condemning. First of all, there was really very little violence in the Capitol relative to the BLM riots that we saw over the summer. Now, I'm not apologizing for the Capitol Hill demonstration. I don't approve of it. But once again, my point is that Trump did not incite it. It was some people that were upset. And if we're going to condemn this so immensely, let's condemn the shooting of Steve Scalise. Let's condemn the BLM riots in the summer that caused inexplicably more damage than the Capitol Hill incident that was not provoked by Donald Trump. I will say it for the fifth time.
I would really like to point out the fact that a huge reason that there was not more violence, which there was, and people did die in the Capitol riot, was that the police response, if those were Black and brown people, it would have been a massacre. But instead, the police opened the gates and let them in and allowed them to storm the Capitol without any resistance. I went to protest. I went to Black Lives Matter protests. And I will tell you that if it got escalated, oftentimes it was because of the police. And when the police are not escalating a situation, we see what happens. So it was a huge difference, and you can't even compare the two things.
I would beg to differ that the police are the ones inciting Black Lives Matter riots, because I guess we just have crappy police departments everywhere in the country then. Because I mean, we've had these riots and this looting really all over in major cities all across the country. So you tend to tell me that all the police in all those cities are just so horrible.
I have to establish that the police system in America, the way that it is set up itself, is not set up for a police department to be successful. The system that the police work within in America is racist, and they cannot be successful the way the system is currently set up. So yes, I would say that most police departments are set up to fail in situations like that. They don't get the training that they need. They don't have the resources. Denver actually just did something where they hired a mental health professional and an EMT to go out and respond to situations that were mental health related. And they had far less arrests and far less injuries because those people were trained to deal with those situations. Defund the police does not mean completely get rid of police. What it means is we need people that are trained to handle these situations appropriately and not escalate them. And our police are not. They are not given those tools, and they are not given the training. They are not vetted enough. And so then we see this corruption.
Well, the police department is not racist. I happen to know many good Black cops in a lot of different areas. I mean, there police departments that I have seen have been very diverse. I mean, certainly maybe there's more white men represented in police departments, but that's also because there are more white people in the United States than Blacks or Hispanics, respectively. But I've seen plenty of Black cops. I've seen plenty of Hispanic cops that I get along with very well and that I've befriended in the past. So I would not argue the police department is racist. I would also argue this whole defund the police thing has not really worked in places like Minneapolis that have actually seen violent crimes go up since the police department was defunded. So,
okay, we got so far off the track. I'm just going to bring this back around and say, you know what? I'm going to bake a police officer a cake so we can get this going. I'll tell you, the hour is slipping by. It's already gone. And I know that people are really looking forward to our conspiracy theory segment. And I'll tell you right now, right before we even get started, Ashton wins this contest. And or it's not really a contest, but what we have here. So we're going to get to this. We got the conspiracy theories. I'm going to start out. And Jacob's going to go second, and Ashton's going to go third. So here, and last week we got flagged because I used the Jeff Jeffries clip to introduce this. So I made a new introduction here at the Chateau de Mars Hill studio that I think I'm just going to warn you right now, it's pretty goofy, but it gives us a second to put on our tinfoil hats. So let's get to it. And here is that intro. Hey, y'all, it's time for the conspiracy theory, so you better get your tinfoil hat out and let's see what's going on this week. So let's see if Facebook flagged that one. So what we do have before we get started, I want to play a voicemail. We actually got a voicemail from someone, and let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and play this thing.
Hi, so great show tonight. This is Lisa, John's wife, and I have a message for Ashton. Ashton, I too love your crown. I think you need to wear it every single week. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Lisa.
So that was our first official voicemail, and I think I played it, and everyone heard it. So if you want to send that voicemail in, you can do that. I'm going to run the banner across the bottom here so you can see that. There you go. That's the number. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with my conspiracy. And basically, I think there's a link that's going to be put up in the comments here that you can click on. But my conspiracy is going to be that the Capitol riot we just talked about some of this, inciting this riot, was all staged. And in fact, the lady that was the woman, the nurse from California that broke in through the window that was shot, it was actually all fake. It was all staged, and she was faked and killed, and then all this stuff was all a big act. So that's my conspiracy theory. And if you want to see more of that, you can go to my friend Chris Moore's show. It is Your Voice, Your Call, and he's on YouTube, and episode 53. And I believe the link is going to be shown in the comments. So you can go click on that and go to minute number 9, and you can watch the whole montage of this so-called fake insurrection. So, Jacob, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I'm kind of piggybacking off my my conspiracy theory from last week, talking about how Trump will be president again on March 4th. Well, in the meantime, before he assumes the presidency and shortly after, all of the politicians and adversaries, the deep state, are going to be rounded up in airplanes and sent to Gitmo. They will be sent there and they'll be shipped there. Right now, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are being tracked down and are en route, as a matter of fact.
So is there some technology that they're going to use on this, or is there something maybe we might not have heard of?
Yeah, I mean, there's some, they got some really interesting drones out there, for example, and airplanes and all sorts of technology they're using to bring in, but specifically the drones. The drones are the big thing they're going to be shipping them down there with. Well,
I think that's a good segue to Ashton's conspiracy theory. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to have to mute my microphone. I've already seen it, and I'm going to still laugh. So here we go. I'm going to put it up. She's actually got a PowerPoint for us. So she's putting us boys to shame, Jake. We're going to have to step up our game. So here we go. She's ready. Look at her in her crown in all of her glory.
All right. So everybody buckle up because I'm about to blow your minds. Birds are not real. All right. Let's just establish that right now. Reagan killed them all off in the 80s and replaced them with government drones. So I would like to give you some examples, if you would. All right. So all the other planets in our solar system, they don't have birds. They also don't have any deaths on their planet. But Earth has birds and a lot of people die. So, take that as you will. And then if you look on the right, the government forgot to take the wrapping off one of their drones and they let it out. They got lazy. I don't know if it was someone trying to send us a signal so we could figure it out, but they didn't unwrap one of their drones. It got loose. And then this one pretty much speaks for itself. If you see, they ran out of cameras, so they just used one of their bird drones. And then Da Vinci drew plans for a bird long before the CIA invented them. So the CIA actually stole this from Da Vinci. And it's illegal to kill bald eagles because they are the most expensive government drones and it costs way too much to replace them. And here you can see it says this area is under constant surveillance and we're watching like a hawk. And they put a drone there, a bird drone. And then on the right, it's all the birds before they were electric. They were being filled up with gas. So it's just photo proof. And then this was a government drone being sent to spy on Bernie Sanders at one of his rallies. And then on the right, you can see the American drone fighting with the Russian drone. So I think that's a really good example there.
So this is, you win a pair of Bernie mittens for that presentation. That was awesome.
You have no idea how deep in the hole I went to find that.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. I won't look at a bird. I'm going to look at a bird differently now. When I hear them singing in the morning, I'll know that they're just like sending in their information to the government and all that stuff. So that's really what the singing in the morning is because they got to report in what happened last night. So that's going to do it for episode number 2. Thank you for all those that put the comments in there. I tried to get to everybody. And remember, if you are commenting on the live stream, keep it sort of short because we don't have time to read everything, but keep it short and keep it to the point. And I'll let you each have a parting comment. Ashton, you go first. Jacob, you go second, and then we'll get out of here.
My parting comment has to be to your wife, Lisa. She just commented and asked if the rescue house sparrow, is it spying on you? Absolutely. Get that.
We have our own drone
out of there. And Alicia couldn't have put it any more, or Kristen couldn't have put it any more eloquently. Black Lives Matter. It is not political. It is humanity.
Very good. Very good.
My parting comment, I really have to respond to Adam Harvey that says, God bless Reddit. It can give you investing advice and it can give you a foul perspective on life. Now, isn't that so true? Isn't that so true? We've seen hedge funds taken down by Reddit, and now we have seen the revelation of the government bird drones on Reddit. So, yeah.
If you're interested in looking more, it's r/birds aren't real.
It's like, and I want to think of my own conspiracy theory. I got to get my game going here. I'm still sort of lame about the one I came up with, but I try to make up with it with my hat. So once again, you guys did an excellent job, and we thank the viewers for tuning in, for your questions. And hey, leave us a voicemail. We'll play it, even though it's from my wife. Sometimes she's my biggest fan. So until next week, 8:00 Tuesday, look for our next show. So have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.